often you find yourself sat there asking, where exactly do I start with this? And how do I get to where I want to be? What's happening, guys? Dan Debenham here. In this tutorial, we're going to look at Lightroom and more specifically how we go about using range masks to adjust an image in sections rather than affecting the entire image and then trying to sort of balance out the lights and darks so you get a sort of medium section, a medium image, so to speak. You can get the image you actually want to get by using range masks in different ways. So, without further ado and without too much chatter, let's dive into Lightroom, let's have a look and see how we actually go about doing it.
As I said to you before, taking the image is a really important step, but more often than not when you get back and you review your image, there is effectively bits in it that you think, that could have been better, or there are certain circumstances where you can't expose for both sets that you need to. You can't expose for the sky and for the foreground or background or whatever, and you need to adjust those things to be able to get the image that you want from the image that you've actually got in the first place, and that is where Lightroom's range masks come into effect. They're a tool that is, I would say, is not massively talked about, but is inevitably one of the better things in Lightroom for adjusting the image in parts rather than as a whole. You basically can adjust it as a different bit rather than having to try and balance the lights and darks together. So we've got an image here which has got some dark areas and some light areas, and what we basically want to do is we want to make the image sort of balance a little bit better and maybe add other bits in that we feel should be there. And this is all, of course, personal taste, but it is down to making the image a better image than you've currently taken. So this image, and I'll put a link in the description below as to where these images can be got from, because this is not one of my images. This is one from a website that lets you tinker with images, and I've done this so that you can go away and get this image and you can tinker with this image the same as I am. So first things first, so we've got the whole interface up and running, and it's all here, and we're good to go, and we're getting everything we need, and we've got the whole system running in Lightroom. We've got the image there. So first thing we want to do is we want to come up to our editing here where it says histogram and basic and what have you, and you'll see one here that says graduated filter. Now we're going to click on that, and that's going to bring up a load of slider bars and one thing and another, and we're going to be using these to adjust the image. So what we're going to do is we're going to come across, we can see we've got a little cross here, we're going to come to the left hand side. It doesn't really matter which side you do, but I'm going on the left hand side to start with, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a very shallow, click and drag a very shallow line across, and you can see it's made no difference to the image whatsoever, and that's fine. I'm going to hit O on my keyboard, and that's going to bring up where that graduated filter is. That is what it's going to affect. So at the moment in time, this graduated filter is going to affect everything that's red. And you can see it's red up here, it's still pink and red sort of down here, it's very red down here. But we don't want to affect the light areas of the image. We only want to affect the darker areas of the image, because that's what this initial graduated filter is going to, that's what we want it to affect. So we're going to come down to the bottom of here on the right hand side, and you'll see one that says range mask, and it says off. And what we're going to do is we're not going to click on color or depth, we're going to click on luminance, and that's going to bring up another box that you can change things with. Now what we're going to do is we're only going to affect the dark areas. So what I want to do is I want to drag this slider across to the left, and you can see that range mask has got smaller. That red box has got smaller, and it gets smaller and smaller because you're editing out, automatically editing out the lighter areas of that image. So I think that works around, for this image, it works around there, and it'll work differently for each individual image that you've got. From there, I can go to smoothness, and what I'll do is I'll just drag the smoothness up slightly, and what that's going to do is that's going to feather this effect. So it's going to feather these lines very slightly, just allowing me to make it look a little bit a bit more real and a bit more like it's not been edited, but it has been taken as a photo. I'm going to hit O on the keyboard to take that range mask selection off, so you can now see the image rather than just the redness, so you can see what adjustments you're making. And from that point on, then we can use these sliders here to sort of adjust just the dark areas. So we're going to start with the exposure, and I'm just going to bring the exposure up ever so slightly. As you can see, it's not affecting this white area, it's not overblowing these whites, it's just affecting the areas that were in red. So we're going to do that. I'm going to add a little bit of texture. I'm going to take out some of the shadows, which again is going to brighten that image up a little bit. I'm going to add in some black. And the reason I'm adding black in is because essentially you get better blacks if you take shadow out and put black in. It still affects the shadow area, it just adds a black rather than a grey, and it just gives it makes the image pop slightly more. So we've got that now, so we're all there with that, and we know that we've got where we want to be with there. What I can do is I can say, let's just saturate this a little bit more. So I'm going to bring the saturation up a little bit here, like so, and I'm going to slightly dehaze it, and that's going to bring in a little bit of the darkness down here still, so it looks like you're looking away, but you're still getting the detail, and you get the detail of the trees and what have you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the highlights down slightly. And this is all minor adjustments, it's all tiny stuff. This is not stuff, we're not trying to make humongous great adjustments to this. All we're doing is we're just trying to just tidy the image slightly. So again, it's very small adjustments, like 16, minus 22. You know, we've got shadows down by minus 40. So we're by 40, so we've got, you know, the highlights are down by 26. We're only exposed over by 1.3, so we're still trying to keep that as we can. Now we can also adjust the temperature of the image, so I can make it cooler or I could make it warmer if I wanted to. I think in this instance what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to make it slightly warmer. So I'm going to go to say maybe 12, and we'll see what that looks like. Now what I'm going to do now is going to click off the range mask. I'm going to come down here to where it says YY, and I'm going to click in here so you can see what the differences are between the original image and the image that we're currently editing. You can see there's far more detail in the image that we're editing. Of course, this has varying degrees of effect on JPEGs because some of that information has been stripped out of a JPEG to make it this file size a smaller file size. These of course are raw files, so all that color data and that detail data is still contained within the image. So it does work to some effect on JPEGs, but you'll get a greater effect if you use a raw image. So next thing we want to do is we want to do a similar sort of thing, but we want to do it for the sky. So I'm going to click on here again, and I'm going to then drag another one out into there. I'm just going to try my hardest to straighten that up. That's just my OCD. Okay, so now we've got one set up for the sky as well. We're going to go down the same route. So we're going to go to luminance again, but this time we're going to grab the left hand range and we're going to move it across. If I just hit the O on my keyboard again, what we'll do is we'll move it up until we've got to a point where we feel like we're okay and we're touching on the things we want to touch on. So there we are with that. What I can do here now is I'm going to fetch the exposure down slightly because I want to lessen the brightness of the sky. So I'm going to bring the exposure down by -1, and I'm going to add a bit of blue in there, like so. So I'm going to bring that blue down a little bit. I am going to add a bit of texture in there, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of shadow, which is a bit of grey, and I'm going to bring the highlights down, which is going to bring in more of that blue. So I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit, and I'm going to darken. Actually, I'm not going to darken that. I'm going to lighten the blacks a little bit, take a bit of black out, and just dehaze it a little bit. Okay, so now that we've done that and we've got those two things set up, let's just click off them and let's just check our image again and see where we are with it. So we can see we've added a bit more colour into the sky. It's a bit bluer, it's a little bit more warmer in this image here, and it's a little bit more detail, and there's a little bit more going off, and we can see what we can do. So what we can also do is there's another way this works as well. So what we can do is we can add a third one in if we want to, and we know we don't need it to go all the way across. So what we can do is we can just move this down here like this, and it's going to affect everything that goes above it. So what we can then do is come down to the range mask again, go to colour, click the colour picker, and we can either click once or we can click and drag to drag a square. I'm going to click and drag because I want to select an area of image of colour rather than just the single point colour. And what I can then do is I can then pull this in and we can make that sky even bluer if we want to, or we can go for a warmer sky, and you can see it's affecting everything above this line here. And what we want to do is we want to just make sure that we get what we need to get. We'll put that colour picker back, and then what we can do here is we can shift this out slightly, and we can then rotate it so that we get as much of that as possible in the blue sky. We can then come out of there, and you can see we can click on each one of these and individually we can adjust them. As you can see, it basically brings up each individual one's settings. So from here we've got some exposure to do, so we can just bring the exposure down, or we can take the exposure up. For me, I think we need to leave it roughly around there. We'll stick some contrast in to make it a little bit darker, and we'll just pull some of the shadows out altogether. Fetch a tiny bit of black in. Let's have it as 5, and what we'll also do is we'll boost the saturation of it a little bit, maybe by 10, like so. And then if we go back and we can check what our image is doing, we can see we've added a bit more blue in there, so it's no longer like an overcast sky, it's more of a blue sky, and it's a bit more warmer, and there's a little bit more going off. Also, what you can do, the range masks also work with this brush tool. So if we go to the brush tool now, what we can do is, if I just hit O on my keyboard again, we can see where we're going to be painting in. And if I just paint in here, like so, let's just paint this all in. And I'm not being massively careful here, and there's a reason why I'm not going to be careful here. And that is because you can actually take it out eventually once you've finished doing what you're doing. So I'll just paint this all in quickly. Let's just do that and get that done. That's all painted in nice and quick, lovely. Now I've gone over the edges here, and you can see this sort of area I've gone over the edges. So if I hold the Alt key down, I get another brush tool with a different outer feather circle, which is what I last set it at. And that allows me to paint that back out. So if I come down here, I can come and I can paint what I don't want to see back out. So it's like, no, definitely don't want to see all that being adjusted. All we want to adjust is we want to adjust the boardwalk effectively. So I can just come down here and just adjust that like so. Marvellous. And then we can go into here and just generally do that. Okay, so we've got that set up now. So what we can then do for this here also is we can adjust the saturation, exposure, contrast, etc. for all of these things. We can also adjust the colour. So we want it to be a tiny bit warmer, but we also want it to be a tiny bit redder. So we want to give it a sort of painted look, sort of mucky, dirty sort of feel to it. We'll pull the saturation up a little bit on that. We'll dehaze it a little bit so that it's got a little bit of weather to it, and we'll add some texture. Let's pull the texture up a bit more so it does look like it's been well used. Pull some blacks in, pull some shadows in, and we'll drop the highlights of that basically so that it darkens it off a little bit. Let's pull the whites out a little bit, like so. And then we've just affected the colour on that, in essence. So let's click on that again, and then we can go to range mask if we want to, and we could change the colour on that, and we could start messing in a similar way from there if we want to. We can also have the density of that range mask to be full. We can set the feather, etc, etc, etc. Because we're using the brush tool, it gives us further options to be able to set what we want it to be set at. And that is in essence sorting out an image after the fact to just give it that little bit more of what you want the image to look like, rather than to be the image that you actually took, and it just allows you to adjust it in a very finite way. It's the same with adjusting colours. You can adjust the colours of trees and so on and so forth individually using range masks. It's just a very powerful tool and allows you to adjust things in Lightroom without having to adjust the entire image.
So as you can see, Lightroom gives you the ability and really powerful tools to be able to get an image to where you want it to be, despite the inability to take it out of time. It can be difficult to balance all those things out whilst you're actually shooting. You might have a light sky and a dark foreground. If you expose for the foreground, you end up blowing out the sky. If you expose for the sky, you're darkening out you're underexposing the foreground. And it's difficult to get those things to balance correctly. And range masks, they allow you to adjust that image and keep the bits of the image that you actually want without sacrificing any of the other stuff. And they allow you to do fairly in-depth sort of edits in colour and texture and clarity and all that kind of stuff, but only on a specific area, in some cases on just a specific colour. And that just allows you to make sure that you get the final image that was in your head is the image that you're actually looking at on screen. So I hope this was useful for you, and I hope that you can put it to some use when you're out shooting and you're out taking photos and you're doing what you need to do, or doing your hobby or whatever it is that you've got, and it helps you to deliver what you had in your head. So with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.